Hi everyone, this is Joe at Tree Pittsburgh, and today I'm out here highlighting our tree of the month, which this month is the Eastern Hemlock, the state tree of Pennsylvania. We typically think of hemlocks growing in cool, moist woodland areas, down along streams and rivers, and that's exactly what we have here. We're out at Todd Nature Reserve. This is out in Sarber, Pennsylvania, Buffalo Township, and there's a cool mountain stream running down through the hillside here. And surrounding us are all these evergreen trees, which for the most part are all Eastern Hemlock. Hemlock does have needles like our pines and firs and spruce, but the needles of hemlocks are much shorter. We typically see them maybe a ½ inch in length. We'll go up here and take a look. They're kind of rounded, they're flattened, they're not really that sharp, so if you touch them, you're not getting stabbed like if you're touching a spruce or something that has a sharper needle. And hemlocks are pretty unique in that they grow in the shade of other trees. So some of the really tall trees up here that don't have any leaves on, these are some of our oaks. And in the summertime, when they're full of leaves, these hemlocks can grow quite well in the understory or in the shade. You can see there's some young ones that are starting to grow up through here. There's really not any other conifer in the state that can do that. So evergreens are pretty important for our winter landscape and for year-round. But hemlocks do a great role growing along streams and providing really shade to these mountain streams. Lots of birds will nest among these hemlock trees. Birds that maybe you've heard of or maybe you've not heard of before. Things like golden crowned kinglet and dark-eyed juncos. There's a bird called pine siskins and a hawk called the sharp-shinned hawk. When you're thinking of mammals, red squirrels, hemlock also is food for our state bird, which is the ruffed grouse, wild turkey, deer, and even porcupine. So depending on where you are, hemlocks really are sort of a buffet for a lot of our animals, especially in the wintertime. When we're walking through hemlock groves like this, they provide a lot of shade. It makes it very cool out here. And that's important for these streams because down in the streams, we have small insects that live, such as stoneflies and caddisflies and mayflies, and they really need that cool water because cool water traps more dissolved oxygen, and that's what they breathe with through their gills. When you have streams like that, you'll have our native trout, which is a brook trout, and they feed along these streams. So hemlocks do a wonderful job sort of keeping our mountainous streams cool and providing habitat for a lot of these insects and larger animals like our state fish. The name is sort of confusing when you say the name hemlock. You know, why is it called a hemlock tree? You know, isn't that the poison that Socrates drank and eventually died? And yes, he did drink poison hemlock. But poison hemlock is a relative of the parsley plant and is no way connected to this wonderful tree. So when we're looking at hemlock trees and why are they called hemlocks, there's really no reason that we know of as to why they're called hemlocks. The leaves or the needles are really high in vitamin C. So people have used the tea that they've made from hemlock needles basically to treat illness. Also, sometimes they would grind up the inner bark and make a flour out of it. The cones are really small, so they look like little green footballs when they're growing. I don't see any cones on these trees. They're, you know, it's later in the wintertime here. It's March. A lot of them have fallen down. Plus, a lot of these trees have grown in the shade, so they'll produce more cones when they're out in the open. A lot of the wildlife have probably been feeding on these throughout the winter season. So the really important thing about hemlock bark is that, you know, in the early years of Pennsylvania, one of the reasons why this tree was so valuable was not only for lumber. You will find a lot of old barns in the state that are still made out of hemlock siding, but really they were using the bark and stripping the bark so that they could use it and sell it to the leather tanning industry. So the hemlock bark would be stripped off of these large trees, basically boiled, and then you know, pelts or animal skin, deer hide, cattle, whatever, would be put in there to tan the leather so it could be used for other products like boots and you know, knife sheaths and belts and whatever you would use you know, leather for back in the early 1800s and early 1900s. So the bark is sort of a reddish brown color. Again, if you're looking at tree ID, it looks like a lot of other bark, but typically when we see these big stands of hemlocks, they have a, you know, more reddish color bark. So pretty exciting to come out and see big groves of hemlock trees. You know, if you're into tree ID, you know, go out, hike around, take a look at all the trees, especially in the wintertime. You can definitely locate the conifers or the evergreens and see where they are, or more importantly, where they're not. So we do have a lot of these trees that have been planted out in residential areas over time. But one more thing I want to mention before I end the video, our friends over at Dancing Gnome Brewery over in Sharpsburg have released their second beer can design featuring great Pennsylvania, Great Pittsburgh trees. And this month they feature Eastern Hemlock on the can. And it's a really cool can design. You can pull off the label and it's sort of like a miniature field guide with lots of information inside. If you're interested in picking one of those up, check out Dancing Gnome Brewery over on their website, dancinggnomebeer.com. And you know, that's it for today. So stay in touch with us at Tree Pittsburgh on Facebook and follow us on Twitter and Instagram at TreePGH. And you can also sign up to get our monthly newsletters at treepittsburgh.org.